Hi everyone, I hope you guys are doing good. So as a part of our Postgres tutorial series, in last lecture we learned about triggers, right? Now in this lecture we will learn about Postgres sequences. So without wasting time, let's start. So I'll first go in the Postgres documentation page. Okay, so this is PostgreSQL 17 documentation page and this is the create sequence documentation. This is the basic syntax, right? There are a lot of things which are optional in this syntax. Okay, so you can write after create statement there is a temporary, right? Temporary means this sequence can be session specific. Okay, unlocked means it can be if you write unlocked then it will not be logged in your wall file, right? Log file of database, right? And then the sequence, right? And if not exist you can include, right? If it will sequence will not exist, right? That check will it will done. And then the sequence name, right? Then there is a data type. You can optionally give the data type of sequence like big int or integer, right? And this is increment by the number, right? So you can give the number from which your sequence will get incremented, right? Every time. This is the min value. Your sequence min value will be, you can define that this will be the minimum value, right? You can also give no min value, right? You can give the max value. You can define the max value of sequence. You can also give no max value, right? You can also give start with, right? So it will, your sequence will start with this number, right? You can have cache, right? So cache is for the performance, right? So you can cache some specific amount of sequence in your cache memory, right? Like 5 or 10 sequences you can cache, right? So it will help you to have a better performance while drawing sequence from database, right? No cycle you can define, right? Then your sequence will not be cyclic, right? We'll see what is cycle and no cycle, right? And this is owned by your table name dot column name, right? So your sequence can be owned by a particular table's particular column, right? If that column gets dropped from that table then your sequence also will get dropped, right? You can also write owned by none, right? So there are some optional methods or optional attributes you can say while defining create sequence, right? You can use some of them. Okay, so this is the basic syntax, right? This is the basic syntax, right, of sequence, right? Now let's start. I have prepared some script, okay, to define demo you guys about the sequence, right? So Postgres sequence are based on begin arithmetic, right? So the range cannot exceed this range, right? So this is the maximum range which a sequence can have, right? This is the maximum range, right? Now let's define sequence with all options. Okay, so this is one sequence I have defined, right? So my sequence name is HR employee ID sequence, right? So let's go in our PG admin and we have databases, right? So I am in human resource database, right? And I opened a query tool of human resource database. Okay, so I'll create a sequence in this human resource database. Let me create it. So to create sequence, the syntax is create sequence name, right? Start with one, increment by one, right? It will increment by one. This is the maximum value I have given. Minimum value I have also given one. Cycle I have given, and cache 10, right? Cycle means it will be cyclic, right? You can also define no cycle, right? So you can also define no cycle, right? So to define no cycle, you just have to write here no, right? No cycle, right? And then let's create this sequence. Okay, so you can see sequence got created. We can go in human resource database and check in our public schema sequence, right? So we should let's refresh this public schema first. Human resource database, let me refresh this public schema first. Okay, so you can see sequence got created, HR employee ID sequence, right? This is the sequence, right, which we defined just now, right? So now to use that sequence, we have three predefined functions. Okay, functions to operate the sequence. These are three predefined functions which we use to operate on this sequence, right? So let me just copy everything and let's see the output of the sequences. Okay, So first I'll check the current value of the sequence, right? So if you run this, so syntax is select curval and then the sequence name, right? Sequence name is HR employee ID sequence, right? So it is giving an error, current value of sequence is not yet defined in this session, right? Because we have not initialized this sequence so far, right? So to get the first sequence from this sequence ID, you have to run the next val function, right? So let's run select nextval and the sequence name, right? So you can see it is giving 1, right? So nextval is 1, right? Then the value of sequence is 1, right? So we can check the current value of also of sequence now, right? Now it is giving me value of 1, right? Earlier it was giving error. So first time whenever you define sequence, so you have to run nextval, right? Then you can get the current value of the sequence, right? There is another function called setVal, from which you can set the value of sequence. So right now current value is 1, right? We can set this sequence current value as 10. Okay, so the function is setVal, right? So let's run this. Select setVal, this sequence name and the value is 10, right? So it is giving me setVal as 10. We can also check again using current val, right? Select current val, so current value is 10, right? So that's how we define sequence, right? So here I am giving all the options, start with increment by max value, min value, no cycle, cache also I am giving as 10, right? So I'm keeping 10 sequence as cache, right, for performance, right? And to drop sequence, the syntax is drop sequence sequence name, right? So you can just drop the sequence by running this, right? So drop sequence is successful, right? So this is the way you can define sequence, right? Let's now define the sequence with the required options only, right? So minimum requirement is like this, right? So you can create the sequence, right, by defining only this much, right? So you have to write create sequence name, start with increment by, right? I'm giving no max value, no min value, no cycle, right? So I'm not defining any max value, min value. I am also not making it cyclic. Okay, so let's define this sequence. So you can see sequence got defined, right? Again you can check all these functions values, right? So it will be working as previously, right? So you can define this sequence with only this much option, only start with increment by 1, that's enough, right? So let's first run the next val. So let's start from next val. So next val is 1, right? So sequence started and the first value is 1, right? Now let's check the current value of the sequence. So current value is 1, right? Now let's set the value of this sequence to 10. So it is set to 10, right? So again we can check the current value of the sequence. So you can see 10, right? And this is the drop sequence, right? So you can drop the sequence, right? So that's how we can define sequence with only minimum attributes like start with increment by, right? Now we'll see what is cycle and no cycle, okay, in sequence, right? So let me just copy everything and let me just demo you guys what is cycle attribute here. Okay, so I have a sequence name is HR, same HR employee ID sequence, start with 1, increment by 1, max value is 5, right, and min value is 1, and it is no cycle, right? No cycle means it will keep incrementing, and once it will reach the max value it will give error, right? And cache also I am defining as 5 since max value is 5, so 5. Okay, so let's create the sequence, right? So sequence got created. Now let's check the next value, 1, right? Again I will run the next value, right, and it will keep incrementing, 2, right? Again I will run 3, again I will run 4, again I will run 5, right? So now it has reached to the max value of 5. This time if you will run, right, so it will give an error, right? Next value reached maximum value of sequence, right? Because you have given no cycle, right? So once it reached max value, right, so it will give you error that reached maximum value of sequence, right? Because your max value is 5, right? But this can be resolved using cycle. Okay, so to use cycle, what you have to do, you have to let me just drop this sequence again and let me just create this sequence with cycle. Okay, so instead of no cycle, let me put it as cycle. Okay, and let me create this sequence again. So sequence got created, right? Now let me just check the next value. So next value is 1, again I'm running, so 2, again I'm running it, next value 3, next value is 4, next value is 5, right? Now it has reached maximum 5, right? But if you define it as cycle, then it will again start with the minimum value, right? So let me run the next value again. After 5, it will start again from 1, right? So it is not giving the error, right? So that's the use of cycle, right? So it's a cyclic sequence, right? Once it will reach to the max value, again it will start from the min value. So that's the use of cycle, right? Now we'll see how we can populate our data using this sequence, okay, in table. So let me just paste it here, the script. So we have one table called HR employee, right? So this is an empty table which has three fields: HR employee ID, HR employee name, and HR salary. Okay. So HR employee ID will populate using sequence, right? So to define that, this is the sequence name HR employee ID sequence, right? Starting with one increment by one, right? And it is a no cycle type of sequence. So let's define a sequence. Sequence already exists, right? So let me just drop the sequence first. So let me just drop the previous sequence first, which we defined. So let me just drop the sequence. Okay, sequence got dropped, right? Now let me recreate this sequence. So our sequence got created, right? Now we have to insert the value, right? To insert the value in HR employee table, and which has three fields: HR employee ID, employee name, and HR salary. So to insert the HR employee name, employee ID, we are using nextval and the sequence name, right? So this will put the next value into this table in this field HR employee ID. Okay, so let's insert this value. So you can see one row got inserted, right? Now let's check the table data HR employee. So you can see one, and employee name is Neha and salary is 90,000, right? And HR employee ID is coming as one, right? Now we can again insert the next sequence, right? So next sequence or next row we can insert, right? So again we have to use same next val HR employee ID, right? And this time the employee name is Suman and salary is 80,000, right? So let's run this insert again. So one row got inserted, right? Let's check the data again in HR employee table. So you can see the next sequence number is 2 and the HR employee name is Suman, and the salary is 80,000, right? So that's how we can use the sequence while inserting IDs in the table, right? Now again one more thing we'll see. Let's check the current value of this sequence. Okay. So current value is 2, right? We can also set the value of this sequence, right? And we can use the max of HR employee ID which is available, right? So what is the max of HR employee ID in this table? It is 2, right? So it is 2, right? So we are setting the sequence using the set val function, right? And we are setting the value as max of HR employee ID plus 5, right? So max of HR employee ID is 2 plus 5 is 7, right? And from this public HR employee, that's how we can also set using set value function, right? And using the ID from this table HR employee. Okay, and I'm taking the max, right? So now let's try setting the value of this sequence, right? So current value is 2, right? Current value is 2. Let's run this. So you can see set val output is 7, right? Again we can check the current value of the sequence, that is 7, right? So that's how we can use set value, right? And we can take the IDs or take the maximum number which I want to set, right? Which I can put it here, and that value will be set for this sequence, right? So I hope you guys like this lecture, right? If you guys like this lecture, please subscribe my channel. Thank you guys.